Outstanding, thank you. I just reminding everyone that this meeting is being webcast, and a reminder to those in attendance, you should refrain from making any defamatory comments. I acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral land of the Ngunnawal people. I recognise the Ngunnawal as the traditional custodians and pay respects to the elders of the community and their descendants. We go to prayer. Let us be still and remember the presence of God. As we commence our meeting, let us together pray for guidance and help. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the welfare of Australia and the people of Yass Valley. Amen. Thank you.
Now there are registered urgent business for your considerations.
Yes.
So they're circulated by email. So it's regarding. Sorry.
Yep.
Is it on forward?
Yeah.
Can you forward it? Thank you. Sorry.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. So in regards to the issue of transfer fees in way for community groups undergoing tidy town and cleanup events, similar to Australia Day events, which we waive fees for, but organised on their own initiative and registered with council prior. I'm hoping to add it as urgent business, as we have a community group out in Downing waiting for an answer as to whether or not they can have transfer fees waived.
Thought that had been resolved.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, at the briefing session yesterday, I've already got delegation for that. It was an unfortunate series of events. They only called for that assistance very late last week. I was out of the office for 2 days. I provided, one of the staff actually contacted them and said, well, these are the things that we can do without too many dramas. And some of that advice was taken. My understanding is that the part of the issue is the size of the trees. So the suggestion was cut the branches off and take those to the Yass landfill for disposal, and the main trunk just use that for firewood purposes within the local community. What's happened is the association have piled all that material up, almost in the shape of a bonfire type thing, and the suggestion has been made. I think Councillor Turner mentioned last night that it's safe in terms of it's not a fire hazard to any surrounding areas because of the way the grounds have been kept, and the intention is to use it as either a training exercise or a community event by then at some time in the future. So at this stage we're okay. We have the delegations in place, but the undertaking that we gave at the briefing session was that we do need to have a bit more of a robust debate, discussion as part of the development of our fees and charges next year. And we're very explicit about the sorts of things that we will support through that purpose, or what incentives we can provide through our fees and charges. And so that was the discussion we had late yesterday.
So I would suggest that we don't need to actually adopt that urgent item.
Could I just ask a question of the General Manager to give that information?
First of all, can we just deal with this? So we had an urgent business. I've got to put it to the vote whether we need to. It's withdrawn. Okay, thank you. And the matter of fees and charges and things is kind of not under discussion at the moment.
But could I ask, please, where that actually leaves the fees and charges for that particular pile of rubbish? Because you said you've had discussions with the group. What were the outcomes of those discussions in terms of how that's going to be changed?
We don't need to change it. The fees and charges already have provision in there for the General Manager to make decisions.
And you said you can do that?
I could do that if they need it. Now, the idea is that if they, for instance, if we had better lead-up time to making arrangements, we could have made an exemption for them up front. The other alternative, as I mentioned the other night, was that if they did incur charges at the Yass transfer station, we could have reimbursed them on the same basis, so that they wouldn't have been out of pocket effectively. So that's in your fees and charges at the present time, and there are some caveats around that, but that's there as it stands at the present time. As I understand it from the group, is that they didn't need to take anything to a transfer station. They simply retained it on site in a neat pile for disposal, if you like, as a community bonfire or something like that in the future at this stage. And they seem to be comfortable with that as an outcome at this point in time.
So they haven't asked.
They haven't
asked, and you haven't suggested that you would, but that's, you wouldn't suspect that might happen.
Well, if they want to take it to the transfer station, that's something that we can look at. But they've, in response to this, the advice that staff gave them, I think it was Thursday, Friday last week, the suggestion was trim the fallen tree up, leave the main trunk there and use that for local firewood, and take the other material to the branches to the Yass transfer station. They didn't do that. They just piled it up on the site, and that's where it is at the moment. In fact, there is a meeting tomorrow about a number of issues that the association president has raised with us, and our maintenance manager is actually going out there to have that meeting. I think it's about midday tomorrow. So there has been some arrangement, and there has been some feedback received that they're comfortable with some of it.
Okay. Moving along to apologies, there are nil. Everyone's present. Declarations of pecuniary interest or special disclosures. Councillor Jones, I think you mentioned one.
I'm going to declare a significant pecuniary interest in 6.4. The neighbouring property is owned by regular advertising in a newspaper business, and council's decision tonight to give them a pecuniary advantage.
Thank you.
And I'll leave the room.
Does anyone else have any other declarations to make at this stage? Okay, thank you. Moving along to confirmation of minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting on the 25th of November. I have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Ferry, Councillor Turner, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. I don't think there are any particular matters arising out of those minutes that haven't been dealt with in current or forthcoming reports. So if we could move on to, there's no mayoral minute today. Moving to the Director of Planning and Environment reports. I'll just run through the 5 quickly and see if there's other discussion. We just for tennis courts and draft management plan. Thanks, Frost. Planning proposal 80 Murrum Bateman Road. Ready? Development application shed at Gundaroo. I think there has been a request to defer that, so we will just have to deal with it rather than the recommendation that's there. Woolgeela Road, Bango, Councillor McManus, and development consent voluntary draft planning agreement Isabella Drive, Murrum Bateman. Okay, so if I could have a mover and seconder for 6.2 and 6.5. Thank you, Councillor Reid, Councillor Burgess. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. So we'll go back to 6.1. Councillor Frost, are you happy to move the motion?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to move the motion. I think, but I'm going to make a couple of comments. I understand this agreement is between council and the Department of New South Wales Government of some fact. And so there's the role of the community association is rather incidental. What it's very short on as a management plan is about who's going to do what. And it says lots of things are going to be done. Reading it, I am understanding that we will come to a secondary agreement with the community association so that they will actually do most of this stuff rather than
okay,
council.
here's what I found.
So could I just get somebody to confirm that that's how the thing operates?
Yep, sure. So essentially the management of the Memorial Hall tennis courts will be handed to the community association. They've been issued, it's proposed to give them a short-term licence, and then once the plan management is resolved on, we will negotiate a longer-term lease with them.
And that will include presumably some sort of annual payment in order for the hall to be kept as a
Report talks about budget allocations, but General Manager, are you?
Look, that's certainly something that hasn't been, it's been put on the table, but we haven't actually come to any arrangement at this stage. But certainly the intention would be to be very clear about it'll be our asset. So major changes to that asset, like let's say a new roof, that would be a budgetary consideration of the council. But if it was cleaning the hall or, you know, buying some new furniture or something like that, that might be something that could be dealt with directly by the association without reference to council.
So that'll get tested very shortly because I think they want to sand the hall, sand the floor, which is somewhere in the middle of the two that you just given. So that'll, as I say, that'll get tested fairly shortly. So I'm quite happy with that, but presumably we'll have that agreement will come before council. Would you expect that to come before council as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the lease,
the agreement with the. Okay. The other point that I just got and it intrigued me rather was that the War Memorial is dedicated to local fallen soldiers of World War I and World War II, which seemed to me rather a narrow focus. I'm wondering if it's a more general war memorial than that, or whether it really is exactly that. Whether other wars are included and whether people that actually survived the war are also included in that memorial, but it's just intriguing.
I'll have to take that on notice.
Would you like to move it?
Yeah, I thought I did.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Yass.
What impact will this have on insurances?
It shouldn't.
If they're in charge, do they lose the coverage that we've always taken over all the halls?
That's been a bit of an issue. Many of these community groups ended up as a 355 community during the last insurance crisis, the HIA insurance crisis. The problem with that, though, is that while they all, if you like, escaped to under the umbrella of councils, I don't think they were actually properly covered. Yeah, I'm not. Look, there's lots of people that did. Lots of councils did this, but the reality is that we've always been responsible for the asset. If we're managing the facility, we're responsible for the asset and its upgrades and its improvements. And what we should have had was agreements with an incorporated body for them to undertake certain duties associated with managing a hall at arm's length from council. That should have been tied up with a proper agreement, but they never were. So we've actually had a number of our committees that ended up with their own bank accounts. It's just about our abatement. We're just everyone had their own bank accounts, but they didn't have any agreement with council to actually manage that asset and be responsible for the incoming and the outgoings. So all that money technically was council's money, and in some cases, what we've done is they've handed the money back over to us, and then we've handed it back as a grant, so that they can continue doing the sorts of things when we put the agreements in place. So again, what we're doing at the moment is putting these on a proper footing, making sure that that agreements are not just sort of a nod and a wink and a handshake, but are proper and clear leases, licenses, or memorandums of understanding, so that everyone knows where they stand going forward.
Yeah, but that doesn't. If you go to one of those devices, I believe they then have to take their own insurance out.
An incorporated body has to take out their own insurance in any case.
Whereas if they remain 355, they're nominally under our control. We spend $3,000. Was $3,000 of our budget goes on all the insurances for all our halls. They all end up having to take out $600 worth of, or $1,000 worth of insurance every year, which is why we drag them back in underneath. So it just needs to be very clear that our insurances cover the hall. So whatever license or agreement We don't want to distance.
Covers the asset.
As the asset owner.
Correct. It covers the asset as an asset
Public liability
is a responsibility of the association.
of the association. So they, we come across the building, but they're now got to take on the cost of public liability, which is
Not super expensive. No, it shouldn't.
another $250, whereas at the moment we pay that money.
No, we don't. We're not covered for they're not covered under our public liability insurance.
We have for it to function.
No, if that's the case, they have to comply with all our rules and regulations for procurement, which none of them do. And where's the problem?
Before we give out a license or a management.
Very important. Very important. The agreement comes back.
Yeah.
We're exposing ourselves and we're exposing them unless it's really clear.
Yeah, and that's
those two big insurances.
okay. Well, there's two things that yes, any incorporated association has to have appropriate insurances in place for their organisation and to protect their members as much as anything else.
355 didn't.
No, they had to abide by all council rules, and none of them ever did.
No.
So there was a major risk. There was a major governance risk for this organisation. We were allowing other people to manage a property on our house with no control over it. So if there was a major incident, who would have copped it in the neck? It would have been this organisation. So the other committees basically have called for a review of all the committees, and that's being undertaken at the present time. So the first cat off the rank was the Jasper Association. They've had a meeting with our risk court manager, and we're working through that with their agreements. So they are aware of what's happening. They have become incorporated as a body, so they're completely separate to council. But if they're to take on the management of the hall, then we have to put that in a proper arrangement with them so that they have that freedom to manage it.
Can we continue to pay? Or can we give them the money? Because again, the two insurances will cruel the organisation.
Well, not necessarily. Most incorporated bodies that I've ever been associated with have to carry their own insurances for their operations, at least. So if they choose to operate and license the facility, then surely they need to make sure that they've got the appropriate insurances in place to cover them in the event of something going wrong.
For the buildings and for the public liability, two insurances.
If it's our asset, it's our insurance. It's not their asset.
So for Jasper, it's our building, so it's our insurance.
That's right.
And all they're doing is covering themselves for public liability, which would be the normal course of the process and is not horrendously expensive. They probably should have it anyway if something happened. Councillor Turner.
Control 6.7 covers it totally. Council will maintain public liability insurance for the land. In the story, all users of the land will be required to take out public liability insurance for the sum of not less than $3 million.
Which is pretty standard for
Whether you're leasing a farm, a house, anything, you usually have to take out about $20 million worth of public liability insurance. It's normal.
Certainly the idea is it comes back to council, the lease and the licence or whatever mechanism comes back to council, and that will be something that happens post the finalisation of the plan of management. The plan of management, while the plan of management is going through its approval process, there'll be a short-term licence so that that can be put on a proper footing. It also then allows us to roll the licence over to a lease arrangement once the plan of management is approved.
Okay. Councillor Frost, do you wish to close the debate?
I think it's been a more interesting debate than I thought, although I think the point, the question that I asked about the agreement between the community association and council coming back to before this body is really, really important, as Councillor McManus has pointed, because the community association will be providing the service of a community hall to that community on behalf of council. Because council is getting out of the community hall, providing business in that area, and the community. So therefore, it would be only appropriate for council to make some contribution towards the costs of the service that it is providing through there. So, but that's a debate for another time. I mean, this one's fine. It's a debate for another time, but I would encourage, when that other debate happens, I encourage council to be reasonably generous with the community association in terms of the funds that they provide, the services that are being provided on our behalf.
Okay, all those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Moving to development application 6.3 application for shed for David Street, Gundaroo. There has been a late request from the applicant that we consider deferring the review or the approval of his development DA. So if no one has a problem, Councillor Foster, if you're prepared to move that we just defer it. Thank you. Councillor Turner seconded. You're happy with that, Julie? Yep, thank you. All right, all those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. We move to 6.4 development application. I think Councillor Jones, you wish to remove yourself from that room. Thank you. So Wagila Road Bango, DA. We have a recommendation in front of us. Do I have someone who wants to move that recommendation or someone who wants to move a separate recommendation?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move for an alternate motion. That staff prepare another report that takes into more detailed consideration the history of this block, and the council has on previous occasions supported a building application. Been in the same family for over 20 years. It's generally consistent with the area which is located.
Just looking at the words first. Councillor Reid's happy to second that motion. Wish to speak to that, Councillor McManus?
I just think there's an opportunity for the staff to revisit some of the histories of this block of land. It was approved by this room several years ago, a building entitlement, and it was rejected by the department. It isn't one of those blocks that's been sneakily subdivided to get a building permit. It's not someone that's coming through the back door to get a building entitlement. It's been the desire of the owners of this since they bought it, when it had a partial building entitlement attached to the emu farm that was never acted upon. I think there are circumstances here that things staff will be able to consider and come back with a further report. I wouldn't like to see that report be significantly delayed. I'm sure if there's an opportunity to have another look at it over the next 2 months, I don't think this council will be doing the owners a disservice.
Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the recommendation in front of you? Right, in that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? None. Councillor, would you ask Councillor Jones to return? Thank you. We've lost Councillor Jones. We're just waiting for Councillor Jones to come back into the room. Okay, so we have 4 items under the Director of Infrastructure and Assets report. I'll just quickly run through those and we can come back to them for further discussion. 7.1, Yass to Murray Bateman Water Transfer Project, creation of easements along the pipeline. No one? 7.2, the same with compulsory acquisition. Nope. 7.3, Yass water treatment plant upgrade project, Councillor Jones. Draft strategic plan, Murray Bateman Rec Grounds going on exhibition and comments. Right, can I have a mover and seconder for 7.1, 7.2 and 7.4? Thank you. Councillor Burgess, Councillor Furry. All those in favour? Thank you. Back to 7.3, Yass water treatment upgrade project. Councillor Jones, do you want to move that?
I have a question first, and then I'd like to move it with an addition to pick something up from the report just to make it clearer that we're going to do something. So my first question is to the Director of Infrastructure is, does the current resolution sitting on our books, I think from back in May, does that impact on your ability to do this project with just stage 1, knowing that we've already committed to stages 2 and 3? Does that impact on you in any way in carrying out stage 1?
No, these are two processes that we have agreed with Deep High Water as a beneficial processes to do in stage 1. So the bubble plume aeration and then the raw water pump station. So that'll sort of slow the water coming into the treatment plant, and it's also for all the electrical work. So that doesn't impact on where we want to go. The stage 2 and 3 will be where council had passed its resolutions.
Okay. All right. So this is really just if I may, so this is really what we're doing is we would be doing this anyway.
Yeah, this
for clarity.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is bring on this quicker than if we wait for the whole solution to be agreed. Is that my understanding?
Yep, that's right. But it still carries out the resolution of the council previously for the complete new water treatment facility.
Okay, thank you.
In that case, thank you. In that case, I'd like to move the recommendation as stands with 1, the update of the Yass water treatment plant upgrade project being noted, and 2, the implementation of stage 1 be progressed as a priority in advance of finalising discussions on stage 2 and 3, including a report back to council with financial modelling of the impacts on local household water charges with any self-funding of the shortfall between the estimated cost and the available grant funding for a new water treatment plant.
Okay, you might have to.
Yeah, no, that's so. For note taking, that's actually taken from the previous, the next page on page 260, which details the impacts on local households of water charges. So the extra words are including a report, come back to council with financial modelling of the impacts on local household water charges with any self-funding shortfall between the estimated cost and the available grant funding for a new water treatment plant.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's the second dot point over the page.
Yeah, if that helps. On page 260.
So go over the page again, next page. Turn up.
That's okay. I'm just going to. With your indulgence, Madam Mayor, and fellow councillors, the reason why I picked this up out of the report and wanting to drop it into our resolution is that I don't think we're being clear enough when we talk about finalising discussions. I'd like it there on the record to show that we are looking at what impact it would have, just like we had to bear the brunt of the raising of the dam wall, and much to previous council's credit, they underwent that project for our water security. This council also needs to go in with its eyes clearly wide open as to what are the impacts on us should we not be able to secure the shortfall.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Turner? Does anyone else want to speak for or against that? Gives clear intent. Councillor Frost.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to ask the mover and seconder if they would consider a further amendment. And that amendment is a part 4, and the part 4 is that a report on the project and the progress of discussions become a standing item on council's meeting agenda until further notice. And the reason I asked that is, and suggested that go ahead, is that because we made a decision on this back in May, and I think we all considered it to be one of the most urgent, if not the most urgent, facing this council over that time. It's now 7 months, and what we have back is we have staff have met a lot of resistance to our proposed course in terms of talking to the state government. So there's a lot of technical resistance. We've also, I think, fair to say there's a lot of financial resistance. It's taken 7 months for this to get back. We're going to consider it here. I don't want it to take another 7 months. I don't want it to take another 2 months or 3 months even before it comes back to council, because I think this is an item that this council needs to engage on, because state government, we're asking them for an awful lot of money, and we're asking them to support us strongly. And in the same way as we did the dam wall, once we got started on that, we had a report that came in every month on that. And it wasn't, and what it did was it updated council and councillors, so every councillor was aware whenever they talked to anybody, whether it be the public or whatever, they knew exactly what was going on at any time. And they could actually help in make that happen. And to my mind, I want to know what's going on here, because I learned a lot the other day at a workshop that I didn't know about for 7 months. I don't want to be asking staff every other week, has anything happened? If we bring it back to council, there's a short report, what's happened, where we're up to, in both the technical and in the financial and administrative sense. I think it would be very useful for this council.
I'm happy for the mover and seconder to consider that, but my question would be, is monthly an extra report on staff going to give us the sort of useful information? Often it's deep high water is the one that's actually slowing it down for us, and to have a report, I'm just being mindful of staff time is all I'm thinking, whether a quarterly or every 2 months or something rather than every month. And I guess it might be just before you consider that to ask the director how useful or not useful, how often we will get useful information. I think I agree with the concept of getting more updates, but whether monthly is actually the appropriate time frame.
I think that with a long gestation project that we've got here, I think there will be, we can do reports every time we're getting nearer like a milestone, which would be, for example, when we go from a concept to, from a, concept design, which we've already sort of discussed about the plan, to the detailed design that Hunter H2O will present. That may be another, point to try and do sort of another, detailed discussion on. But I don't think there'll be enough progress each month to actually put a report, on this.
Through Madam Mayor, we do give briefing papers out every month on a vast range of projects.
Yep.
Particularly where to give council information if in case they're asked a question regarding other projects. I tend to agree with the director. I think you need where there's a key milestone, or you're coming up to a key milestone that requires a decision, you certainly should be properly informed and briefed about that. But the problem with some of these projects is that we can go a month without having any response from the department. So a report that simply, a monthly report that says nothing happened this month is
Probably not as useful.
not as useful as it could be.
I tend to disagree. I actually think that nothing happened this month is very useful if we're trying to make something happen and things need to happen. And the fact that we and the general community know that nothing happened this month because we didn't get a response from Sydney. To me, that's very useful. And presumably it doesn't take very much staff time to do a report that long.
Through you, Madam Mayor, while I'm not in favour of making work for work's sake, I think like even a one-line report to tell us where the project, who the project is currently with, is very, very useful. In fact, the state government has that very same thing on their websites with the Department of Planning. You can actually see like what stage a project is at, and you can just log into the website, see its design phase or its construction phase or planning phase, and it's really, really useful. So you can actually see it shift, and it's not a frustrating thing to go in and check it if you know that these things take some time. So I'd be happy with a one-line report which tells us still with DPA planning or discussions. I don't want to make work. I don't want to see the whole briefing that we're getting in this very in-depth report, which is, like Councillor Frost said, really satisfying after a long break of not knowing what was going on.
Through you, Madam Mayor, in the council update that comes out each month, in there is an update of where we are with the water treatment plant, which is basically that one line update about what's started, what's not started, and where we are with each of the points.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I think that's excellent. The problem that we have is with our meeting rules, we cannot discuss this item in council unless it's on the agenda. By putting it as a standing item on the agenda, so that comes forward and becomes the standing item. If there are issues that councillors have, if there are issues that anyone has, we can easily discuss it within this meeting, which is the right and proper place for it to be discussed. So I would suggest that we do the short report. It'll be short sometimes, it'll be long sometimes, it'll be full, but it will not only inform councillors, but it'll show that councillors that they wish to be informed.
It's up to your movement second if you think that's unacceptable. I would have thought quarterly would have been sufficient, but my view. But that's what's been moved and seconded. Did anyone want to speak for or against any of those items in the moving and seconding? Councillor McManus, then Councillor Furr.
I'd like to move to the quarterly. I'd like to move that the dot point 4 won't be a monthly thing, be quarterly. I actually think it's a good thing to keep reminding us it's on the agenda, but having
Proposing an amendment.
having 2 or 3 nil, we're just wasting time. So we actually have a quarterly review, and it just gets attached to the quarterly review and do a quarterly as opposed to monthly.
That's as a proposed amendment.
I think it's a good idea to have it regular, but I don't.
Councillor Furr.
Regular.
Mayor, I just want to, for clarity, is that standard item or standing item?
Standing.
Thank you. I think it regardless, any information is good information, so standing item. Thank you.
So they never be on a quarterly basis.
Every 2 months.
Really good information regardless.
Sorry, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the director's just pointed out, it's actually a regular item in the action sheet, and therefore it shouldn't be hard to take that regular item from the action sheet and bring it forward on a monthly basis. If there's no change in the action sheet, there's no change in the report. It should not require any huge extra effort. If it's going to be reported in the action sheet, and it's also reported to council in the regular meeting.
The only thing I would say to that, and you can all vote on the second, is that the action sheet is not as formal. So they've got to actually spend more time writing another report that formally says nothing's changed. I guess that's why I'm thinking every 2 months or every quarter, but the decision is yours, councillors. Thank you. This in the spirit of Christmas and cooperation. Thank you.
Am I closing this?
You are officially closing. Thank you. If after you change your amendment,
All right.
if you want to amend it.
I'm happy to change the motion to bi-monthly progress reports.
And council attorney, you're happy to accept that, yes? We've spoken. You can close.
Okay. Look, I'd actually like to thank Councillor Frost for adding that. I know that when I'm watching projects from the state government, which are state government projects over the value of $30 million, they usually come out of our hands and are taken under control of the state government, and you can see where the project is up to. You can see whether it's in planning or community consultation or design. Now, this council is no stranger to taking on projects of multi-million-dollar worth because the state and federal governments haven't stepped up to assist. I think it is a very important thing for our community to see transparently what is going on, particularly if they become the underwriters for this project. There's potentially a $20 million shortfall in this project. So many people are invested in the idea of good quality water. I think it's really important that we go in eyes open, because this may not solve our problem that we're experiencing in town. And it's a bit of the elephant in the room, because we also have an ageing infrastructure getting the water to the homes, let alone the infrastructure to treat the water itself. And so I think it's important that we know what we're spending our money on and what result we can expect. It is so disappointing to see that the Department of Planning, Infrastructure and Environment are not on the same page as us. I think the peer review is excellent game changer to try and get them to the table to talk. Many of you have seen and stood over that ageing infrastructure that was built in the 1950s and updated in the 90s, and the fact that that thing is still doing the kind of job that we're expecting it to is remarkable. I think any touching of that is going to put in jeopardy our water supply, and so for them to say that we don't need a generational change infrastructure upgrade is something that I really hope we can get them on the same page for in the future.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, I'll put the motion as it stands. All those in favour? That's everyone. Thank you. I've been like sharing meeting each other halfway. Okay, if we could move on to the Director of Corporate and Communities reports. There's actually only 3, so I'll just go through the annual report. There's been an extension to the 31st of January. You're moving, Councillor Frost?
No, I don't move it, but I say you're going to do them one at a time.
Yes.
Yes, I haven't got to move, but I have a question for that.
Yes.
And the question relates.
Second, sorry, Councillor Turner. Thank you.
Yep. In 2019-20, how many kilometres of roads were resheeted? Noting that it was $47,000 worth of resheeting was undertaken. And how does that number fit with the long-term plans to resheet the LGA's gravel roads? That is, how long will it take to resheet the lot at that sort of rate? And more importantly, what are the plans for gravel resheeting in 2020-21 and 2021-22?
If the 47,000, which would have been just probably would have only managed to resheet about 1.5 kilometres, that amount there. As you recall, we've allocated the local roads and community infrastructure program about 1.02 million towards gravel resheeting in 2021. And I think our recommendation was also that we, that we discussed that we would then, in the budget for 21-22, have a look at reinstating a gravel resheeting program, because we haven't had a gravel resheeting program for 3 years. This is the third year that we haven't had a gravel resheeting program.
I'm at a little bit of a loss here, and I'll go and do some research and come back to you. But my understanding was that gravel resheeting was a big part of what we proposed to do with the increase in rates that we had with our 8%. That upgrading our roads, getting them both resealing and gravel resheeting was a big part of what we did. Now, as a council, we've been lax by the sound of it. From my memory, we've been very lax, and we didn't even notice. And I think that's probably how it is, that we didn't even notice that our gravel resheeting had disappeared. Now, there was some complications there, I know, because a lot of our workforce were doing work on, they were using funds to repair roads that have been damaged by flood work, but somewhere along the line we managed to slip this out, and it concerns me that our budgeting and whatever our budgeting has allowed us as councillors, because I don't think any of our councillors was actually aware that we got their resheeting that they wouldn't have actually perked up. So however we go about this, haven't got a system that alerts us to something like this. So I don't think Councillor Burgess would have been very happy about anything if he'd actually known that there was no gravel resheeting or there was 1.5 kilometres. So can we look very hard, not just at how much we need to do, because we'll now need to catch up, I would have thought. Right? And are we talking about $1 million every year that we need to put in here? And could I ask that we have a look at our processes to make sure that important things that we would regard as bedrock to what we do in our budgeting don't get overlooked, and they do come to the attention of councillors.
Can I just come on, Councillor Hucker, I'll just remind everyone, we also spent a lot of money on timber bridges, were falling down, so a lot of that money went towards that resheeting, rebuilding and bridges. So I'm reminding you. Yes, Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for a point of clarity on that, what Councillor Foster's brought up, my understanding is there was a program, but it was partly inhibited by drought, so we chose not to do a lot of it because of the water, and that was a significant part of, we think, of the 3-year process. And ad hoc resheeting was done post-storm and specific events. So I think maybe it's the terminology. It's not that there wasn't a program. There were some variations to the program that didn't let it be delivered to how it was the expectation under normal conditions. So, yeah, I was curious if that's your thought process.
Yeah, there was, in the 2016 flood, there was, through you, Madam Mayor, there was a significant allocation of, natural disaster funds to gravel resheet various roads, but not obviously not all the roads in the LGA. And I think there was a view at that time that we had spent, with that natural disaster funding, that would have been sort of sufficient for a while. So therefore, the gravel resheeting, I think, program didn't reappear the following financial year. And then, as you quite rightly put out, we then got into the drought, period as well. But for councillors, what I've asked for Terry Cooper, who's our Manager Engineering Services, to do, which it will run into the budget process and the operations plan for 21-22. Terry and James Dugdale will, do a presentation on what we will need to be done on roads and what dollars we will need, what gravel resheeting, what programs that we will need. So we'll at least, get that visibility to councillors for their decisions concerning budget allocations for a range of activities, and one will be roads.
Thank you. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm following this with great interest. A question on, we talked about emergency resheeting taking place due to flooding or heavy rain or disaster or a variety of things. One is how are we tracking it, and whether or not it's actually in this report. I've flicked through our Excel spreadsheets in the back and I can't see it. And two, if not being tracked, can we get that included in future? Three, can we include in that workshop some understanding of how we're actually tracking and monitoring this, because I think it has implications on any future budget considerations, considering we're doing it anyway, basically.
The tracking of natural disaster funding will be through the acquittal. So because we get that natural disaster funding, we would have to do an acquittal report back to the funding body. So this is what we did. So this is what we claimed, this is what we did. So that information will be there. That's the only emergency funding for gravel resheeting.
Yeah, sorry, clarification through Madam Mayor. I'm referring to situations where we've had a rain event, like not a disaster rain event, but where we've had instances where we've had to do resheeting because of the fact that it's been desperately needed. It's being done on an ad hoc basis. So
that would be done through a normal operational budget, but yes, we do need to give you better information in terms of what those programs are at the start of the year and how we're progressing against them.
Okay. We have a mover and seconder for that. So all those in favour? Thank you. Moving on to the investment and borrowings report. Again, is provided, received and being noted. Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Reid, Councillor Frost, thank you. Are there any questions at this stage, councillors?
Outstanding report.
All those in favour?
Point nine.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 8.3, 2021 quarter 1 budget adjustment for employee benefits. We asked for an additional report to be brought back to council. And I have, well, obviously we have a report here for noting. I have a move and second, or are there questions at this stage? Councillor McManus.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thank staff for coming up with the clarity. My understanding with quarterly budget reviews, it's fine-tuning how we're going against our planned budget from the start of the year. What I see in front of me are significant changes into the way we account for all staff in the organisation, including particularly in regard to on costs and the way we allocate workers' comp. But I would imagine that those changes would normally be done. If you're going to do something as significant that change the way you report such a significant amount, that would all be part of your budget that you adopt, not something that you adjust quarterly. Hence the reason I was particularly alarmed at the numbers, because they weren't quarterly adjustment figures. It was actually a complete reshaping of the way we account for our employee costs. So hence the reason I asked the additional report. It is clearer, but I would think that these sorts of changes of these sorts of magnitude should have actually been reported as part of our budget planning process at the start of the year. Now, is it being done because of changes to accounting standards? And if that's the case, it probably should be referred to the Risk and Audit Committee to make sure that we're doing it right. And if we weren't doing it right, why hadn't auditors picked it up right at this? I'm not saying either way is right or wrong, but I would believe changes of this magnitude should have had either the full budget process at the start of the year, or it should be referred to Risk and Audit for them to come back with an opinion, whether it's an internal opinion or an external opinion about whether this is the right way to do it. I don't know. I've got power locks. I see figures of -2 million here and up 2 million there, and we adopted that. And then in this report it says, well, what you adopted last month's going to change anyway. So we're continually tinkering with something of significant magnitude. I don't know whether that's the right way to do it. Sorry, Madam Mayor. That was a question. Clarity.
I've asked the responsible accounting officer, our new chief financial officer, to attend this meeting. I think part of the answer is, of course, we've had a significant change within the finance area, and Tracy coming in as the new CFO has come in with a fresh set of eyes, and with that, a review of what we do with our finances. So I'll just invite Tracy through the chair just to make comment to what Councillor McManus has just said.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So basically there's a couple of changes that occurred within that budget set. We removed the training costs, which no longer form part of employee benefits. And so that was one change that was made. The really big change, though, was the way that we account for those internal charges of on costs. So basically you'll see a large income amount and a large expense amount to offset that, but it's basically just moving some of those costs around within the whole employee benefits budget. Going forward, I don't see that as necessary, simply because it's an internal charge, and it's definitely never of the magnitude of about 2.5 million. So what I did was actually I took out the income side of it in the first quarter review, but I didn't offset that with the change in the expenditure side of it. So that's where you're seeing those very large movements. Going forward in the second quarter budget review, you'll see me taking that expenditure side out. What I've also done with consultation with Eric and councillors is I'm starting to phase that budget. So what we're starting to do is have a budget that's more aligned to our monthly costs as opposed to just an annual budget. So as we progress through, yeah, you will see some smaller tinkering. Yes, it's a large chunk right now. And in hindsight, I probably should have waited and did it all together. Yeah, my bad on that one. But going forward, what you'll see is more phased budgets. So we can adjust for if positions aren't filled, or when they do get filled, rather than having a budget for the whole year. If they get filled halfway through the year, then we take out that budget that wasn't spent. So that's what you'll start seeing.
A more interactive budget than this annual process, which I think was raised with Alison through the ERIC as a more useful tool, not only for councillors but also for the staff and management to actually see what's happening on it.
Green means good and red means bad, yeah.
Yes, it does.
It's easier for cash flow management purposes as well.
I'm appreciative of the fact we are moving to monthly. The intentions to move to monthly. So as Councillor Harker said here a couple of months ago, that we're great to get those business monthly reports. The problem with the 9 councillors is we didn't know that was happening, and all of a sudden we see -2.5 million. And you go, whoa, hang on, you haven't appointed 6 people. The office has got less people than it has, and all of a sudden we're going in the wrong direction. This really should have been done as part of the budget process, not as a quarterly tinker. And even our motion from last month was to actually endorse the budget, adopt and endorse. And we should have just noted it, because it's changed a week after the meeting. It changed again, but it's in motion, the whole thing. It's really not set in concrete, which is what the whole idea of adopting a budget or that's the plan. But at the same time, we now realise that staff are actually going to keep moving it anyway.
I'd have to say though, Councillor Harker and then Councillor Turner, just as a comment, all budgets move continually.
They do.
But Councillor Harker?
Madam, I'm saying just a point of order. Just in order to facilitate this conversation, can we move the motion and second it?
Yes, I thought we did. My apologies.
No, I didn't. I'm still confused.
Okay, can I have a mover and second? Sorry, councillor. Thank you, councillor Turner. We started with a question, which then led into more of a discussion. So my apologies to you all. Moved and seconded. So councillor Harker.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I was to ask Tracy a question. Just so I understand what you were saying there, there seems to be 2 points to that. The first was the 2.4 is a timing, transitional change. So is that, if that ever happened within the quarter, it actually wouldn't be noticeable? Okay, yeah, so that's, you approve something, so yeah, it's gone out, in and out the wrong months. As in, if it was in the 1 month.
Next one's the next month.
If it was in the same month, you wouldn't have noticed it.
No.
It would have been neutral, but it's fallen outside of the period, the change. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the second part was an actual change in, I suppose, accounting in terms of the salary and workers' compensation going to a project-based situation versus being in sort of a current funding pool. So there'll actually be, which I see is probably a really positive thing, that they'll be itemised to each individual project and it'll be a true costing versus sitting in a general funding pool.
Absolutely, and that will happen especially with capital projects, grant funded projects, so we can capture all of the costs associated with that project. Currently, we cost everything to just a general ledger, but being able to on-cost them to those projects, we'll be able to make claims on grants that will include all of the costs associated with that project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor McManus.
Is this because councils have traditionally done to the general ledger, all councils?
Yeah.
So is this a new standard that we're working towards? It's not a local government standard.
No, it's something that
This is
can
not the way
totally
local
be
government does
done.
it. Sorry?
It's something that can be totally done and other councils are doing it. On cost is not a new thing.
No.
It's just the way it's allocated and the way it's budgeted for. So rather than having a budget with an income and an expense side sitting in the same budget line, I've just taken that out.
To what standard? Is it to a new, is it,
I can probably answer that.
yeah, please, someone.
Well, not in terms of the accounting standard. So this has been a move in the last 12 to 18 months in local government. What happens is you get the grant and they don't have any labour component on it. And so you're just stretching your resources more and more and more. So what they're moving to is a more, code-based accounting. So you can actually factor in the true labour costs of the project. And when you go for the grant or you have proof of previous work, you include the labour component because it's a constant problem, what has been for the last couple of years. So I'm assuming it's a much easier way of costing the whole project properly than constantly saying, you're going to go and do this project, I'm going to get money, but you're going to do it too, and you're going to do it too. Like it just stretches your resources too much without the correct accounting to justify it. That is my assumption of.
It's actually just the standard. What standard are we? I actually like the idea. What accounting standard? We're not going to move away from local government standard. We're saying that.
Well, I think this is where the local government standard is going.
So to answer that, I shouldn't be answering on behalf of you, but it's not a standard, it's a management practice. Yeah. So it's not, there's no standard code that says you have to do it this way or that way. It fits legally within the accounting legislation, but it's how you choose to operate your business. That would be.
And we get pronouncements from the Office of Local Government about the application of the accounting standards. So that will give us advice about what standards we should be applying. It's like the whole thing with valuing land under roads. It came from nowhere. All of a sudden, our balance sheet's been thrown in, like every other council.
Same problem.
In chaos. And the practice of accountancy, it's becoming more and more a whole body of thought of itself as it looks to get more sophisticated over time. But it makes it more complicated. And every time they decide, and the Office of Local Government, we have to comply with an accounting standard. If they said tomorrow we didn't, we don't. So we're taken from really, we take our advice from the Office of Local Government about the application of accounting standards.
I appreciate what you're trying to say there. Is it worth coming back to council with that you have verified that this fits within the accounting process? It's it's a process that is perfectly acceptable, just to give that level of reassurance.
Do you want to run it past the audit risk
I
committee?
think
Okay, we can do that.
That gives
That gives
independence.
It's a good question. It is a, yep. Just take that on as an agenda item.
So that, given that, I'd actually like to amend the motion, which is where
I'm
we.
sure councillor Turner's ready to amend the motion. Could you like to make a suggestion to councillor Turner?
It may be suitable to the mover and the second that it also be referred to for the risk committee, just to verify that this is an appropriate standard in accordance with local government and with good accounting practices. I'm not hostile to it. I started off more in confusion than anything else. It was the same thing when they had declared that roads were assets. And they've been a liability ever since. So I appreciate that two things change, and it doesn't actually help us. But I think if it goes to the gurus on the Audit Risk Management Committee, I'll come back with a little report and I'll come to the next Madam Mayor.
Okay, the movement sector happy with that amendment. Thank you. Is anybody else? Sorry?
Yeah,
You may.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Accountancy tends to be somewhat of the dark arts on many cases, and I compliment the director for bringing an interpreter to shed light into the dark arts. I think it's been a very valuable conversation overall, and I commend the department for following the management process rather than the dictates of auditors from above. It's like a much better arrangement, and I commend the motion.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Moving to the General Manager's report. There are 3 items that need to go into confidential because it relates to individuals. Thank you very much for coming to. So 3 of those items are 9.2, 9.3 and 9.4, which relate, 2 of them relate to tender evaluation reports that need to go to confidential, and the other one is an application for financial hardship. So I move Councillor Ferrier, seconded Councillor Harker. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. We go back to 9.1, design of this civic precinct update. He's for noting. Councillor Jones, would you like to move?
I would, and I'd like to include a second point. I will take some advice on the beginning of it because I'm not sure I've got the right group of people that I'm going to start with. So I will take some advice on the start. That the project steering group seek early community consultation on location options to guide council's adoption of the final site. The reason why I put this in here is because while we as a council have a preferred site, we went out to the community and we said, what do you think about everything? So we need to lock it in one way or the other. Now, I don't have a preference at this point in time, but I can see that the community have, my personal preference, I should say, but as a council, we have a preference for this particular location. But we went and asked the community everything, including what site do you want? And some people have suggested Riverbank Park, and there are a lot of things that are beautiful about that. If you had a library there, if you had an amphitheatre and concert, it would connect with the new development happening in Yarra with walkways going through. It would also engage that end of the street in a way that hasn't been engaged since some smart people decided that there was some water issues down that end. And then we went and built a beautiful, great big dam, which catches a lot of that. So there are some things that we need to finalise. And this council, well, the previous council has felt the pain of not locking in the site with community consultation, and I'll refer back to the Park and Ride project. So I have a lot of pain in my memory that makes sure that I say these words now at the very beginning
let's make sure that we have got the right site and that we have agreed to that as a council with all the elements that have come in. And it may still well be our preferred site as a council, which is right here. But we need to take this step because I have learnt my lesson well and truly from the past that if you don't, and you don't justify this step, then all of those beautiful ideas that the community has have not been a part of the process. And we can't bring them into the process on location after we've engaged the project guys to build a concept plan specific to this site. So have I got the right group, the project steering group, or do I need to adjust that to council, or what needs to be in there?
There's a couple of things. There was one submission out of all the submissions received, all the representations we've received. Yeah, but there was one submission that suggested the Riverbank Park site. And certainly that particular area has major problems in the sense that there is no plan of management for the area, and you've got significant flooding problems in comparison to a site up in this location. Sorry? Right. It'll significantly add to your building costs if you end up with a building on stilts.
I think it's 5 metres. 5 metres.
It would be significantly a significant issue with with building in that particular area. That's one of the reasons why it's a community park, is to keep structures out of large structures, occupied structures out of that area. So it is a technical. It's a major technical issue that would significantly add to your costs. Yep.
And there's a report in that warrant which actually looked at building down there, and I believe
that's right.
There was a report prepared for this place, and the minimum building height was 5 metres on Transborder's old depot, and that's why that was rejected 15 years ago. So there's already been a report presented to this room that talked about the building costs. You wouldn't give permission to build any of the buildings that are down there now.
Well, I would agree with that because there's two things. One, that decision was made prior to the latest floodplain report.
Well prior.
So the latest floodplain report would probably put it further up. You've got a height limitation above natural surface level around CBD area,
yep,
which would again you would run into problems with. So while you might be able to build a building down there, it wouldn't necessarily fit with all the planning constraints, flooding constraints that you have for that location. So as I said, in terms of the submissions that we received, there's only the one submission that suggested that site. The vast majority of submissions that came in were confirming this site was certainly a preferred site and didn't see any reason to look at other sites at this point in time. So all those submissions that came in, which admittedly weren't a significant number. I thought we'd actually get a lot more than that, but we didn't. So again, I'm not sure why we need to go back to the community to consult on that issue. You've got that information.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you confirm that this is the site that you're looking at?
Just to add to that, if you keep changing the site, or we're not actually going to ever get to a decision. If you keep trying to ask everybody, one person says they think it's a good idea down there and 10 say it's a good idea up here. Why do we keep going back and asking the same question over and over again?
Wait a minute, but yes. My understanding is that that's what Councillor Jones suggested, that we actually make a decision on it, that the report comes in and we actually make a decision on it. What the General Manager seems to be suggesting is, we've got the information, so we don't need to publicly make a decision.
Councillor Frost, you're getting me wrong. I'm suggesting that you make a decision. I'm suggesting you make a decision. The information you've got the community consultation, or the information that came in with all the submissions, that's been circulated to councillors previously. You've got all that information. As I said, there's one submission that talks about a site other than this site. All the other submissions refer to this site. Sorry, I think there's 2 other submissions. One said the Civic Precinct project should be a cycle trail. I think the other one said it should be a park. So of all the submissions we got, the majority were talking about this site. My suggestion would be, if you want to confirm a decision, you can confirm it based on the information that you've got at the present time.
We haven't actually got a seconder for this anyway for a start.
So, Madam Mayor, the information that we've just received from the General Manager is excellent. It actually allows us to do something. It allows us to make a decision. But we can't do that right here, right now, because we didn't say that we were going to do that right here, right now. So at the next possible opportunity, I suggest February meeting, we bring back exactly that. We bring back the flood management study, which knocks out the locations suggested in the community consultation process, so that we can finalise our decision formally, in having had the community feedback. We need to close the loop. We need to close that community consultation loop on the location. And that's what, you know, we could have done right here, right now, had we had that in a report and advertised to the community that we were going to make a decision and adopt that site. So while the council has a preferred site, for a lot of good reasons, we asked the community for their opinion on a range of things, including the location. So it's important that we publicly make a decision and close that feedback loop. So I withdraw number 2, and I look forward to the opportunity.
Can I suggest maybe that with number 2, instead of the steering committee, that you actually, and it's up to mover and seconder whether you want it, that we actually have a report to make a final decision on the location be brought back to the next council meeting.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. Thank you, Chair.
With the debate's full, doesn't matter, we'll just go through it. Councillor Ferry, sorry, you wish to speak for or against it? So I'm just checking that we've got the words up there so everyone can see what we're doing.
Madam Mayor, going into the table now. So councillors, after that big discussion about the location, get ready for something a little bit more fine-tuned. Question on the change manager and the peer review. So the first question is, what are we defining as change manager, and why is the change manager only engaged for phase 3? Second question is, what are we defining as a peer review, and why is the peer review not occurring for all phases?
The peer review is basically a review of the DA documentation and the assessment, which is something you do after someone's done the assessment. So you can't do it beforehand. You have to do it at that particular point in the planning process. It's pretty common. I think if you a lot of the major projects do end up with a peer review, but it's usually after someone's assessed the project, and then it gets checked to make sure that nothing's been missed in the. It's like an audit to some extent. So that's why the peer review is pushed off to phase 3 and phase 4 of the time frame. Again, taking advice here from the project managers who've built these sort of approvals for these major projects, council chambers, and civic precincts. So again, we're taking their advice based on their experience. The change manager is more about dealing with staff accommodation issues as much as anything else. It's about, and again, you do that once you've got a design, and as part of that design process in terms of building fit out and making sure that everyone's accommodated in the new facility, that the spaces meet the appropriate standards, that the right teams are grouped together in the right locations. Again, it was something that I wasn't aware of the need for a change manager, but again, having listened to the advice of the consultant, the project manager, about what works well in other projects, their suggestion was for a change manager to be added at that point in the particular process. So again, they're the two things that you can't do right at the start. You have to do midway through the design process.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I wish to speak against the recommendation, only from the perspective of the table. I think that we just as a note for future things, we need to give further thought in the future about change management generally. And I know Councillor McManus talks about building power poles. Part of my role quite often day in, day out is working with change managers. And there's both internal and external change management here. I do think there is potential to have some sort of external change management capability looking out towards our community, towards our businesses who might be using this site. I'm not clear whether or not that's captured as a part of this wider approach done by the project management consultants. But I think this is something I've raised before on other issues, is that there's a massive misunderstanding, I think, from the general public about what change management is and what it does, and it needs to be factored going forward.
Councillor McManus, will you speak as well?
I've got a question. The geotechnical tends to look at what's underground, particularly for rock and
Tanks.
backfill. It won't look at tanks.
It will. That's what it's intended to do.
It does both.
We did ask that question at our briefing thing, so.
Yeah. The intention is that it deals with both issues, because we do know we've got tanks, and we also do know that there are some fill issues.
There is fill issues.
So consequently, we do need to look at two aspects of the geotech. One is that the ground conditions, the design of any footings is going to support the building that we intend to build with. That's one thing. And the second thing is that we need to deal with issues that might be related to contamination, because the solution relates to the extent of the contamination, what the problem is. So the intention is that the geotech does look at the contamination issues as part of that process. And the sort of consultants that are being, if you like, we're seeking, have the ability to do both. Yeah.
Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the recommendations? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Okay, moving along to minutes of the Traffic Management Committee held on 11th of November 2020. There are some recommendations in there. So moved, seconded by Councillor Frost, thank you. I think they're reasonably self-explanatory, the recommendations that come out of the committee. Unless anyone wishes to speak for or against it, I will put the minutes. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Moving to minutes of the Memorial Hall Committee meeting 26th of November. So moved, Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know that.
Have a seconded, Councillor Turner.
Madam Mayor, I don't want to move the motion that's recommended. This committee actually had a series of motions. If you read the full committee minutes, there was a series of motions. For some reason, only some of those have been brought forward, and I would like to include all of the motions from there, which, in addition to the ones that are there, there is item 8.1 that a report be provided covering steps that have been taken to repair the box gutter spill drainage, including actions taken by the SES, that is the SES report, and follow-up actions undertaken and planned by council. 2, the routine maintenance schedule throughout the hall up to present date. And then 8.2 needs to be included that an audit of the true state of the hall complex, identifying priorities and broad cost estimates for remediation be undertaken. And then finally, there's an 8.3, which I'll have to go to because it's long. The committee's initial priorities for the potential improvements to the hall to make it fit for contemporary purposes are: 1, installation of adequate air conditioning; 2, upgrade of the kitchen facilities to commercial standards; 3, improvements in the standard and access to the toilet facilities; and 4, upgrading of the hall furniture to allow more flexible and easier storage.
Can I ask just a question for clarity, if I may? you've got a committee decision and then committee recommendations.
No, ma'am, could I explain what happened with this?
That's what I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, let me go back and explain. I had to go through I want those included. But ma'am, this committee met whenever it was in November. Its previous meeting was 2 years before. And that meeting they met with the then acting general manager, who then became the general manager. It's not our current general manager, but the general manager before. And the committee for a long time has been particularly the butt and a buffer between a community that's unhappy with the way that the hall's been run and maintained, and council staff. And it's been an awkward situation for the committee. The committee wants to see the hall go forward, and that means to have a very good use going forward. And they understand that buildings without use tend to degenerate, and we've got a few of those in the main street. And one of the things that it was trying to do was to look at the future directions for the hall. So it tried a lot of ways, and then eventually said, well, we engaged that general manager and said to that general manager, can you help us with a process that'll allow us to find a future direction? Now, that process was delayed and delayed. The general manager moved on and so on. And the idea of having a workshop for us to actually work out where we might go with the hall stopped. And then I asked the new general manager several times and senior staff, and the answer I got was, oh yes, it's in hand, it's in hand. When that actually came, it wasn't what we'd asked for at all. It wasn't a workshop for direction. What came was a survey of the general population based on some ideas that came from somewhere that nobody ever knew. The committee wasn't engaged. I, as a committee chair, wasn't even told that this is what was going to happen, and we weren't. And basically, the committee was told, "Well, you can go to the public meetings, and that's what will happen." So, you know, we worked through that. But what's come through, and formed the basis for this committee to work on this time, was something that was completely inappropriate and not asked for. It was a survey. A public survey. It meant nothing. It gave us no basis on which to go forward. So the committee is a bit irritated. I was very irritated by that because they felt that they'd been let down by the system. And I won't, not a particular person, but the system had let them down. At this meeting, we've had changes of staff and we have completely different staff now running it. And at this meeting, we didn't have the person that actually runs the hall and has responsibility from staff at the meeting. That was because he was ill, and that's fair enough. But what was there was a staff member sent along, and I think had only been here a week, and he was obviously struggling, wasn't able to provide any information to the committee about particular issues, in particular about maintenance, in particular about that accident with the roof leakage. That just wasn't available to the committee. But the committee went ahead anyway. By the way, the committee for many years has not hasn't been given any administrative support. And so that me as chairman have been taking the minutes. In this case, the young gentleman involved, who's a very nice chap, gave me his notes, and I put the minutes. The minutes were not in this form. The minutes were in terms of motions. They were all the same, no identification. I was contacted, once I provided these to staff, I was contacted and said, could you please, do you mind if we change them into a format that better suits the way that council does things? We're happy to comply and do so. That is where the distinction between committee decision and committee recommendation came from. I didn't really take much notice. I didn't take much notice of the significance of it at the time, but it didn't come anywhere from the committee.
I accept that, Councillor Frost. The issue is if the committee wants council to make a decision, it makes a recommendation. If a committee is, for instance, calling for a report because it hasn't got sufficient information, that's their decision. It doesn't need council to tell them that's a good idea. That's what they should be getting. And that's why the distinction is between committee's decisions and a committee recommendation. So if you're saying that you want council to, just trying to pick one, 6.1, the committee recommendation on 6.1 is that you want council to confirm the maintenance of the hall as part of the council budget, detailed report on maintenance plan and advice of estimates. That's a legitimate thing to be asking council for a decision on. But if you're saying that, and if I go to general business, which is the box gutter maintenance, so 8.1, the committee, and this is a committee decision where you're calling for a report and just say, we want information, officers, on steps that have been taken to repair the box gutter and the routine maintenance schedule for the hall. So does council need to make a decision on what you're after, or do you just make that decision? And that's the distinction.
Let me put it to this, but I can understand how that may happen in some committees in some ways. With this committee, what has happened when we get that, when the committee has made those sort of decisions, is nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. And so what is required here, what this council and what I'm asking the council to do is for council to say that report is produced and that it comes to the committee. Not leaving it out doesn't allow that to happen. And the experience of this committee has been that these things do not happen unless we get council to ask them.
Councillor Frost, it's a new regime now. If there's a committee recommendation, a committee decision that calls for a report, the officer associated with that committee will be directed to write that report
to the committee.
And that's the promise that I give you, is that my expectation is that whoever's the executive officer for whatever committee we have at council, if a committee says we want information, it's the responsibility of that officer to coordinate getting that information to the committee members for their consideration. And if out of that extra information that they say, well, we now need a council decision to say, which might be put some extra funds in the budget, the next budget, for that to occur, then that gets considered as part of the council's decision-making process. So if there's a committee decision in those minutes there where the committee's asked for information, I agree. You should be getting that information as a committee chair and as committee members, and that the officer responsible should be providing that information to you.
Well, the officer responsible wasn't there.
No, it wasn't there.
It wasn't there. And the notes that were taken by the person that was there didn't actually say it. So I put them in the minutes as something that I want council to do. Can I just go to one more? I'll go to a further one, which is, you looked at box code, but let's have a look at we need to know what happened with that box cutter. And so
I agree.
They need to know. So what the council should know as well what happened with that box cutter.
The council, this is what I'm getting at. The council, sorry, you've called for a report.
Yeah.
The officers give you that report. Yeah. That then comes to all councillors through the next set of minutes of the committee. So they would get the information. So, for instance, when you're considering that report on the box cutter, and you say, okay, as a committee, we recommend that council put some resources into getting that box gutter fixed, or whatever the issue is with the gutter, then that comes back to council for a decision on whether they're going to put resources into that issue.
Well, at the moment, we haven't been getting the reports, and when we've asked for reports, and when we've asked for reports very specifically, we've been given something else. Could I just go
down a little bit?
Yeah, okay. Could I also go to that an audit, I would have thought that committee asking for a full audit of the true state of the hall complex and so on was a rather significant amount, and therefore it was something that I think this council should be involved in, and council should be asked to support rather than say we'll do it. Otherwise, because of this.
So if I may interrupt, councillor, if I may. At that point, seeing as we're going point by point, at that point, there are no dollars around it. So we can't, as a council, make a decision on something that we have no knowledge of. That report comes back to you as a committee with some numbers around it to say, we recommend a council spends $20,000 getting that audit report done, is how it should be working. And I think that's what the general manager's confirming to you is how it will be happening in the future. As opposed to everything,
Okay.
I can't adopt a recommendation that I have no dollars around and how it's going to be allocated and where it comes from.
We're not asking you to adopt the audit. We're asking you, we're asking you that an audit be provided. And it's not asking you to adopt it, it's asking you to be provided.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Frost. The issue, I have there's two options to deal with that decision of the committee. One is I allocate staff resources to do that work, so we're using budgeted money that we already have. The other option is that I can't allocate council resources because they're already stretched or overstretched. So if that's the case, I've got to say to the committee, we need X amount of resources to be able to get somebody in to do that project. Once faced with that information, the committee can then say, well, we think that is really important. We need council to allocate some resources to bring somebody in to do that report. That's how it works.
Okay. So what's wrong with it working by your council saying now that we think it's really important, and
I agree.
And then we just go ahead from here. So what's the problem with it going in?
I agree it's important. It's a decision that you want that information. As I said, I've got choices about whether I use existing staff resources or whether I need extra resources to be able to deliver that information to you. I'm confident enough that we have staff in this organisation who can actually do that work and provide you with a recommendation about the condition of the hall and what maintenance work needs to be done to that hall to bring it up to the required standard. I'm also confident that the staff can actually estimate what the sort of costs are associated with doing that maintenance work. And then it's a question for the committee initially of how do we prioritise that? What are the priorities for that maintenance work? And that if the committee then adopts those priorities, that can be a firm recommendation to council to say they're the priorities for your budget allocation.
I understand the long process that you've got. This committee has become
I understand the frustrations. That's why I'm trying to get it on the right track.
Frustrated. This has become frustrated, and you seem to be putting more bureaucracy in.
No. I'm trying to.
No, I'm very glad that you've made the assurance in a council meeting that these resources are going to be available, because that's exactly what we wanted to do and what I'm trying to achieve here. And could I just go to the final point, and this is 8.3, right? Now, the committee very carefully did this because it is aware that occasionally resources become available in terms of grants and so on, and it thought that council should be aware of the committee's view of what were important in terms of the first priorities for the committee to go ahead. So it included those into that motion so that the council can look at them and adopt, and I would suggest adopt those as the priorities. We have a situation, for example, installation of air conditioning is a huge problem for summertime. We had a situation with the kitchen the other day where the fridges didn't work. And the response came to the CWA, who were holding a regional conference here, was, well, maybe you can move your conference because we don't have it. Then people were told, well, maybe you could bring your own fridge. Eventually, council did the right thing and provided a fridge hired a cool room and brought it down. Now, that was very glad that happened. But the information that comes back regarding that hall and about the PR that's done about that hall would be pathetic, to be honest. And we need.
Steady.
Well, I'm being steady for 2.5 years. I'm not going to be steady here because that was not good. It's the very nicest you can say about it. And what we need here, what I want council to address here are those priorities and agree that these are the priorities that if there is money available, they're the first things that we need to spend money on in the hall. As the committee works through the other information that they've sought and getting, then they may refine that and give council other recommendations. But at the moment, that's how they are.
All right, councillor Jones. Sorry, councillor, I apologise, councillor Ferry, it was so long ago, I've forgotten.
So semi point of order first, and then I'll speak to the matter itself. So I, as a councillor, personally need to understand what we are going to be debating here, because I understand where Councillor Frost is coming from, and I think the best way to potentially resolve that is by simply saying that we note the report, the recommendations. Sorry, we note the report, the decisions, and the recommendations be adopted from within the report, because I'm concerned at this point that we've already spent a significant period debating the issue. And I have to defer to yourself, Madam Mayor, as to whether or not it's acceptable to simply say, can we just note the recommendations, the decisions?
That's exactly what the report actually, that's what the current recommendations currently says, is noting the report and with the following recommendations being adopted.
And those recommendations are
the ones that are from the actual minutes of the meeting.
And they get one.
Councillor Frost trying to add in the decisions of the committee, which is actually they're not the recommendations. Anyway, councillor, you finish.
I'm not, Madam Mayor, respectfully.
Just
wanted to one, take the sting out of this, because I think we actually need to talk about the root cause of the issue here and the source of the issue, which has been raised before by myself as a councillor, which is there seems to be a current schism between the expectations and understanding of councillors and the expectations and understanding of staff around the operation and the processes behind our Section 355 committees. The request was made by myself that within the fortnight we have a session to discuss 355 committees overall as a concept, some of the concerns that councillors have had. I recognise that there is currently an internal review going on, and I appreciate that, but I think what's happening here highlights that there really is a very priority need to have that session. The second part, the final part, is we talked 3 or even 4 years ago about training that may be necessary for people in leadership positions in Section 355 committees. I, as a councillor who am on 3 Section 355 committees, to be completely honest, was not aware that we were using the concept of committee decisions as a concept. So I'm quite ignorant in the dark about that. So those are the two parts. One is I feel that we actually need to have an overall discussion about and a workshop about Section 355 committees, because for councillors, we care a lot about the consultation of the community and grassroots democracy, and that's what we're looking to achieve out of these committees. And two, to actually get some training to ensure that people who are in leadership positions probably don't end up in a situation like this where they feel quite disgruntled because they feel like their minutes have not been taken as they were. So those are the two. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Jones, sorry.
Just on the minutes, the way the 355 committees are set up at the moment is that they adopt the actual council, their codes of meeting practice. That's what we're locked into right now. So they should be as per those code of meeting practice. Movers, seconders should be recording the votes. We don't actually record the votes in committees at the present time. That's what your rules of meeting practice. We certainly have the brief, if you like, as part of the review, is to look at ways of making that simpler and easier and less bureaucratic. We get that. And until we've got that in place, it's going to be, we're in this in-between period. But if you literally took the way we do minutes, committee minutes, you always usually start off with confirmation of the minutes. And it comes up as a recommendation. Why does this council need to adopt a recommendation for someone else's committees? It just doesn't make any sense at all. So that's why the idea of trying to identify what's a decision of the committee versus what is we need council to make a decision in respect of something that we feel very strongly about. So that's why we have them, and we've had them for some time, although I must admit that some of the templates don't copied and pasted and they don't always come through that way. So we do need to sort that out. If you should get past the impasse of this tonight, if you wanted to make all of those committee decisions recommendations, that's fine, you can do that. But I still think that council making a decision on calling for a report that is of relevance to the committee,
Not to us.
not necessarily to council at this point in time where you need to make a decision about resources or policy, it doesn't seem to make a great deal of sense. I give you a commitment that if a committee makes a decision calling for a report, staff will be working on that report and will give it to you, and you should expect it. And if they don't do it, I want to know about it. But certainly, if you for convenience, if you wanted to make a recommendation, fine.
I will be extremely short this week. I've come to the realisation that we have to have faith in our staff. Let's accept that the staff reports will make it back to this committee. We'll all be watching with growing interest now because it's been highlighted that this has been an issue for this committee. But what I do note is that while Madam Mayor was quite right in saying we can't adopt many of these recommendations as a decision that we're going to make because they haven't been financed, we do know that at least 2 items already have been costed because we considered them as part of the rural and community infrastructure grants. And they are the installation of adequate air conditioning and the upgrade to the kitchen facilities. So I suggest we pull that out of the report and add at item 8.3 potential improvements dash. We add these from the list. 1, the installation of adequate air conditioning, and 2, upgrade of the kitchen facilities to commercial standards because we know what they cost. And we will note the next 2 priorities from the committee, which is improvements in the standard and access to the toilet facilities, which we don't know what that's going to cost, and the upgrading of the hall furniture to allow more flexibility and easier storage. So if we put those 1 and 2 as listed after item 8.3 potential improvements.
Why don't we just note the committee's recommendations on the prioritisation of upgrades and keep it short and sweet?
That's okay. I just thought we could adopt it because we know what they cost. But if whatever.
Well, we adopt it. Does that mean we're putting it in the budget?
That's the thing. Is if
we
you
voted on that.
We're adopting their priorities as our priorities when we do that.
Yeah, I would really. Does everyone have the same priorities?
Because we kind of already did when we
didn't. That's why
we tried to. We lost.
Sorry,
we
yes. Yeah, in my own world, we did.
I just the simplest way you can adopt.
Councillor Jones is still standing, so you two have to stay seated.
So the simple solution is that those committee recommendations with those known costs be considered as part of the upcoming budget process.
Okay, let's do that. Yeah. So that those with known cost items 1 and 2 be considered as part of the budget process. Thank you.
Thank you.
And can council note the other 2 priorities? We note that, please, in the minutes. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McManus, do we need to?
No, I'm happy now. I'm happy now.
And so we're just going to note.
So Councillor Frost and Councillor Turner, are you happy with that?
We're going to note 3 and 4. Yeah.
So they're being noted.
We're going to make them as
the committee's priorities.
It leaves a trail.
Yeah,
I can know what.
So if Councillor Turner, you want to speak, or Councillor Frost, you're going to close that.
Before you close.
Yeah.
I think it is important that council has actually established the priority on this. This is a hall which is supposed to be the memorial to the fallen, amongst other things. It has had not a lot of money spent on it inside since the bicentenary, when the interior was painted by Elia, and he did a hell of a good job. But not a lot of money has been spent on it since in the way of maintenance or improvement. It is really important for the community that this hall achieves its place, which is the Memorial Hall. It is the Soldiers' Memorial Hall. It is currently deteriorating, and I think it is important that council establish what the priorities are. with the greatest respect to those who did the budget for when we were intending to spend some money, that money that was allocated for the kitchen will probably do the sinks and not much else. The cost of the kitchen is going to be considerably higher than anything that has so far been quoted, and therefore it needs an audit. We need an audit on what needs to be spent on as a matter of urgency, and we need a costing of what the kitchen is truly going to cost to make the hall usable as a community centre.
Which is exactly the recommendation that we're adopting, not trying to adopt all the decisions
Correct.
or requests for information that the committee has asked for. Councillor Frost, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think perhaps we've got what we needed, which is basically that council is very aware and has made a decision on all of these items, and it's as they should be. And unfortunately, the way we do this, and it's interesting just talking to a couple of councillors, so have you noticed that there were things in there that motions that hadn't come through? What a few councillors said no, and that's the fact that this is fit, and these things come towards the end. And I think it is important that the committee's deliberations, and certainly the motions from the committee, come to there. So while I understand what the general manager is saying about how you do this, I'm not sure that that's a good way of necessarily doing it, because I think it's really important that this council is aware of the thinking of committees like this, and those committees are aware that councillors do actually understand where they're going in particular things, because that's what keeps them going to the committees and doing the job for us that we need them to do. So let's go with that motion. Thank you very much, and I commend the motion.
Thank you. All those in favour? That's everyone. Moving on to 12.3, 2020 Local Government Conference. Councillor Furey, who's kindly given us an update. I assume you're happy to move it. Seconded, Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I'll speak very quickly, mindful that there are, I think there's another appointment after this.
No, that's okay.
So, Madam Mayor, look, I think the highlights from the highlights would simply be that I was very impressed that Local Government New South Wales was actually on the pulse. They were talking about, disaster recovery, disaster preparedness, bushfire, flood, pandemic. They had expert panels with both federal and state ministers, representatives from key emergency services agencies and other organisations. And that, even the Premier Gladys Berejiklian was at the conference, in fact. What I would say is that looking at the motions as they were debated, a lot of them, yet again, were on the pulse. Our colleague councils are in fact talking about some of the really important key issues. The good news, in wrapping up, is probably that one of the concerns that I've consistently heard over the past 4 years from this council is, it's all based out of Sydney. You have to travel up there. There's time involved. All the logistics around that. They are looking now at having both the actual events held online as an alternative solution for all councils, which saves on travel costs and actually getting to the event. But that also includes for training. They are looking at online delivery of training, which I think is a great outcome for regional and rural councils. So on that note, really impressed, thought the finger was on the pulse, and looking forward to the next one.
Councillor Hogan.
Thank you. Very briefly, just a question. Did we not have a motion up about weeds and support? Did we not get to that?
No. We got to 58 instead of 128, and I think we were 102 or something. Yep.
Do we put it back up? What do we do?
No. What happens is that they now go to the executive makes the decision on all of those without.
As to whether they take that forward or not.
Who's the executive?
The executive of the local government.
New South Wales.
Okay, thank you.
As much as we wanted, it was. I would say the only other comment I would make to it was that there were a lot of the recommendations were of a similar vein, and my feedback to Local Government New South Wales was that when they were talking about funding, for example, with our FAGS grants, there was lots of questions about FAGS grants and how it should be amended. instead of actually taking each one as a separate motion and speaking for and against it and they should have actually taken it as a question, have a full review of the thanks grants be undertaken with all of the comments that everybody has supplied, and people talk to one motion instead of 25. We were still on 25, I think, when I got in there, and the last 8 got done in one hit. So we got to 58 only because they did 8 in one hit, because they're all the same. They should have done that along. It would have been better to actually progress the program.
Last question, Thomas. When will we know? When does that decision come down? Is there a time frame on that? No time frame. Okay.
We can write to them and ask them what they're thinking, but which we should probably do. Thank you.
As I mentioned, the CEO contacted me the other day. We teed up within the new year. I did say the other day at the session, if there's any feedback that you would like me to take to the CEO about, because if you remember, we did put them on notice. We wanted to see some improvement in performance and services to local government, particularly rural councils.
Training.
If there's anything you would like me to add to what we've already put on the list for them to look at, feel free to just drop me a line and I'll make sure that the CEO is aware of it, as distinct from the board.
No, just that much. Thanks.
All right, councillors, thank you very much. We actually need to move into the confidential section of the meeting. So if I can have a mover and seconder, Councillor Harker, Councillor Reid, all those in favour to go into confidential. Thank you. That's everyone. And we'll stop live streaming. Let me know when we're off streaming.